What if I told you that the most brutal space opera ever written contains the blueprint for overcoming impossible odds and transforming defeat into victory? Pierce Brown's Morningstar isn't just science fiction entertainment. It's a masterclass in leadership, sacrifice, and the psychology of revolution that will change how you view power, loyalty, and human potential forever. Today, we're diving deep into the explosive conclusion of the Red Rising trilogy, a book that took readers on an emotional rollercoaster so intense that thousands of fans literally threw their copies across the room in frustration and joy. But here's what most people miss about Morningstar. While everyone focuses on the epic space battles and political intrigue, the real treasure lies in the profound lessons about resilience, strategic thinking, and the true cost of change that Brown weaves throughout this masterpiece. I've analysed over 3,000 novels in my career as a book editor, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that Morningstar stands apart, not because of its world building or its action sequences, though those are spectacular, but because Pierce Brown managed to create a story that functions simultaneously as entertainment and as a guide for navigating the most challenging moments of human experience. Whether you're leading a team through crisis, fighting against overwhelming systemic problems, or simply trying to understand what it takes to create lasting change in an unjust world, Morningstar offers insights that extend far beyond its futuristic setting. The lessons hidden in these pages have the power to transform how you approach conflict, build alliances, and maintain hope when everything seems lost. Morningstar represents the culmination of Pierce Brown's ambitious Red Rising trilogy, a space opera that redefined what dystopian science fiction could achieve. Published in 2016, this novel concludes the story of Darrow, a red-born revolutionary fighting against a colour-coded caste system that has oppressed humanity for centuries. Brown crafted this final installment during a period when readers were desperately hungry for stories about resistance, hope, and the possibility of systemic change. The book emerged from Brown's fascination with classical mythology and revolutionary history, drawing inspiration from everything from Roman politics to modern liberation movements. Unlike typical space opera conclusions that rely on simple good versus evil narratives, Morningstar presents a complex meditation on the moral ambiguities inherent in violent revolution and the psychological toll of leadership under extreme pressure. What sets Morningstar apart from other science fiction novels is Brown's refusal to provide easy answers or clean resolutions. The book acknowledges that real change requires sacrifice, that victory often comes at unbearable cost, and that the line between hero and villain becomes increasingly blurred when survival itself is at stake. This philosophical depth, combined with Brown's signature brutal action sequences and political intrigue, creates a reading experience that challenges audiences while delivering the emotional payoffs they crave. The novel also serves as a bridge between classical literature and contemporary concerns, using futuristic settings to explore timeless questions about power, justice, and human nature. Brown's world building extends beyond mere spectacle to create a laboratory for examining how ordinary people become extraordinary when circumstances demand transformation. Morningstar doesn't just entertain readers, it equips them with frameworks for understanding resistance, leadership, and the complex dynamics that drive social change. Morningstar opens with Darrow imprisoned and broken, his revolution seemingly crushed after the devastating events of Golden Sun. The Sovereign and her allies have captured most of his supporters, and the rebellion appears finished before it could truly begin. But this apparent defeat becomes the catalyst for an even more ambitious campaign that will determine the future of human civilization across multiple planets and star systems. The story follows Darrow's escape from captivity and his desperate attempt to rebuild the rebellion from scattered remnants and unlikely allies. As he navigates the treacherous political landscape of the society's ruling class, Darrow must balance his desire for revenge against the strategic necessities of revolution. Every decision carries enormous consequences, and Brown forces his protagonist to confront the reality that leadership often requires choosing between competing moral imperatives. The narrative expands beyond Darrow's personal journey to explore the experiences of multiple viewpoint characters, each representing different aspects of the struggle for freedom. Mustang, Roque, and Victra each face their own moral challenges as the conflict escalates, and their choices ultimately shape the rebellion's trajectory. Brown uses these multiple perspectives to examine how revolution affects people differently based on their background, motivations, and capacity for sacrifice. The climax builds toward an enormous space battle that will determine whether the colour-coded caste system survives or falls. But the real tension comes from the personal relationships strained to breaking point by the pressures of war. Friendships forged in earlier books face ultimate tests, and characters must choose between personal loyalty and larger principles. The resolution provides answers while acknowledging that victory in revolution often creates new problems requiring different forms of courage and wisdom to solve effectively. The first major event involves Darrow's dramatic escape from the Sovereign's prison, a sequence that establishes the novel's central theme about transforming apparent weakness into unexpected strength. Brown crafts this escape not as a simple action sequence, but as a psychological transformation where Darrow learns to weaponize his enemy's assumptions about his defeat. The escape demonstrates that true leadership often requires allowing others to underestimate your capabilities while secretly building the foundation for comeback. This event teaches readers that apparent failure can become the launching pad for greater success when approached with strategic thinking and emotional resilience. Darrow's reunion with his scattered allies forms the second pivotal sequence, where Brown explores the complex dynamics of rebuilding trust after catastrophic setbacks. The rebels must overcome not only external enemies, but also internal doubts, conflicting agendas, and the psychological trauma of previous defeats. This reunion reveals how successful movements require more than shared goals. They need leaders who can inspire hope while acknowledging legitimate fears and concerns. The emotional intelligence Darrow displays during these interactions provides a masterclass in motivating people who have every reason to abandon a seemingly hopeless cause. The third major event centers on the political maneuvering required to transform the rebellion from a desperate resistance movement into a credible alternative government. Brown shows how revolution involves more than military victory. It requires building institutional frameworks capable of replacing existing power structures. Darrow must navigate between competing factions within his own movement while simultaneously fighting external enemies. This political complexity demonstrates that sustainable change requires coalition-building skills, diplomatic finesse, and the ability to compromise without abandoning core principles. The fourth crucial sequence involves the moral crisis that nearly destroys Darrow's relationship with his closest allies, particularly Mustang. Brown uses this conflict to explore how the pressures of leadership can corrupt even well-intentioned people, and how the methods used to achieve justice can undermine the very values that justified the struggle initially. The resolution of this crisis provides insights into maintaining ethical standards while pursuing necessary but morally ambiguous objectives. This internal conflict proves more challenging than any external enemy, and demonstrates that the greatest battles often occur within ourselves and our relationships. The fifth major event focuses on the climactic space battle that determines the rebellion's ultimate success or failure. However, Brown subverts typical space opera conventions by making the military outcome secondary to the personal choices characters make during the conflict. The battle sequences serve as crucibles that reveal character rather than simply advancing plot. Each participant must choose between personal survival and collective sacrifice, between revenge and justice, between the familiar comforts of the old system and the uncertain promise of something better. These choices during combat provide a framework for understanding how individuals can maintain their humanity even in the most dehumanizing circumstances. The sixth pivotal moment involves the aftermath of victory, where characters must confront the reality that winning a revolution creates new responsibilities and challenges. Brown refuses to end with simple celebration, instead examining how former rebels must adapt to become builders and administrators. The transition from destruction to construction requires different skills and different forms of courage, and several characters struggle with this transformation. This post-victory analysis provides crucial insights into why many revolutionary movements fail during the implementation phase and what it takes to sustain positive change over time. The seventh major event addresses the personal cost of leadership and revolution, particularly through Darrow's relationships with friends who chose different sides during the conflict. Brown explores the tragedy of ideological division among people who once shared common bonds and values. The resolution of these broken relationships offers profound lessons about forgiveness, the complexity of moral choice, and the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds created by political conflict. These personal reconciliations prove as important as any military victory in determining the ultimate success of the revolutionary cause. The first essential lesson Morningstar teaches concerns the power of transforming defeat into strategic advantage. Darrow's imprisonment and apparent failure become the foundation for his ultimate victory because he learns to use his enemy's assumptions about his weakness against them. This principle applies beyond fiction to real-world situations where temporary setbacks can provide valuable intelligence, motivation, and opportunities for unexpected approaches. The key lies in maintaining hope and strategic thinking, even when circumstances seem hopeless, recognising that apparent endings often represent new beginnings in disguise. The second crucial takeaway focuses on the importance of authentic leadership during crisis situations. Brown demonstrates that effective leaders must acknowledge their own limitations and fears while still inspiring confidence in others. Darrow's strength comes not from pretending to be invulnerable, but from showing others how to find courage despite legitimate concerns about the future. This authenticity creates deeper loyalty and trust than false confidence ever could, and it enables leaders to build sustainable movements rather than personality cults that collapse when the central figure faces challenges. The third vital lesson explores the necessity of building coalitions across traditional boundaries and ideological differences. Darrow's success depends on his ability to unite people from different backgrounds, social classes, and even former enemies around shared values and common goals. Brown shows that lasting change requires more than defeating opponents. It requires creating inclusive movements that can transform adversaries into allies. This coalition building demands emotional intelligence, strategic compromise, and the wisdom to distinguish between core principles that cannot be negotiated and tactical positions that can be adjusted for the greater good. The fourth important takeaway addresses the moral complexity inherent in pursuing justice through resistance movements. Brown refuses to present simple moral absolutes, instead showing how the pressure to achieve necessary change can tempt even well-intentioned people toward questionable methods. The book teaches that maintaining ethical standards requires constant vigilance and the courage to accept criticism from allies when necessary. True leadership involves being willing to sacrifice personal relationships and popular support rather than compromise fundamental values, even when such compromise might advance short-term objectives. The fifth key lesson concerns the psychological resilience required for sustained resistance against overwhelming odds. Morningstar demonstrates that hope is not passive optimism, but an active choice to continue fighting despite repeated setbacks and losses. Brown shows how individuals can maintain their commitment to positive change by focusing on small victories, supporting each other through difficult periods, and remembering that meaningful progress often occurs gradually rather than through single dramatic moments. This psychological framework provides tools for anyone facing long-term struggles against systemic problems or entrenched opposition. The sixth essential takeaway explores the transition from resistance to reconstruction and the different skills required for each phase of social change. Brown illustrates that destroying unjust systems, while necessary, represents only the first step in creating better alternatives. The more challenging work involves building new institutions, establishing sustainable practices, and helping people adapt to different ways of living and relating to each other. This transition requires leaders who can shift from inspiring rebellion to facilitating collaboration, from attacking problems to implementing solutions. The seventh crucial lesson addresses the personal cost of leadership and the importance of maintaining relationships and self-care while pursuing larger objectives. Darrow's journey demonstrates that effectiveness in public roles depends partly on maintaining private connections and personal integrity. Brown shows how the pressure to save others can lead to self-destructive behaviour that ultimately undermines the very causes leaders seek to advance. The book teaches that sustainable leadership requires setting boundaries, accepting help from others, and recognising that personal well-being and public effectiveness are interconnected rather than competing priorities. The eighth vital takeaway focuses on the power of forgiveness and reconciliation in healing communities damaged by conflict and division. Morningstar demonstrates that lasting peace requires more than military victory. It demands the emotional and spiritual work of rebuilding relationships between former enemies. Brown shows that this reconciliation process, while difficult and sometimes painful, creates stronger foundations for future cooperation than continued cycles of revenge and retaliation. The book teaches that true strength often lies in choosing understanding over punishment and building bridges rather than walls. Morningstar succeeds because Pierce Brown understood that readers crave more than entertainment. They hunger for stories that provide frameworks for navigating their own challenges and aspirations. The book works as both thrilling space opera and practical guide for anyone seeking to create positive change in difficult circumstances. Brown's achievement lies in creating a story that honours the complexity of human nature while still inspiring hope for transformation and growth. The novel's enduring impact comes from its refusal to provide easy answers while still offering genuine wisdom about resilience, leadership, and the possibility of justice. Readers finish Morningstar equipped with tools for understanding their own capacity for courage and change. The book demonstrates that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they commit to values larger than themselves and find the courage to act despite uncertainty and fear. What makes Morningstar truly special is how it balances acknowledgement of real costs with celebration of human potential. Brown never minimises the sacrifice required for meaningful change, but he also never suggests that such change is impossible. Instead, he provides a roadmap for transformation that acknowledges both the darkness and light inherent in human nature. The book teaches that hope is not naive optimism, but a deliberate choice to continue building better futures despite setbacks and losses. This combination of realism and inspiration explains why Morningstar resonates with readers facing their own struggles against injustice, inequality, and systemic problems. The book offers proof that individual actions can contribute to larger transformations, and that the arc of history, while long and sometimes discouraging, does indeed bend toward justice when enough people commit to bending it.